Have you ever heard your own voice, asking for forgiveness? Not in a dream, not in a memory, but echoing through an old tape you've never seen before. That's what happened to me. A single sentence whispered through static shattered everything I believed about my past. Forgive me. The voice trembled, distant yet unbearably familiar. It was my voice. The same tone, the same hesitation. But I had never recorded that message. At least, that's what I thought. The sound crawled under my skin like a ghost refusing to rest. I replayed it again and again, hoping it would change, that maybe the distortion was tricking me. But every time, it felt more real. The trembling breath before the words, the subtle crack in the voice. It all carried something I hadn't felt in years. Guilt. You ever felt that kind of guilt? The one that doesn't fade, only hides in silence, waiting for the right moment to speak again. Stay with me until the end. Because what I found inside that tape changed everything I thought I knew about myself. The room was dim, lit only by the yellow glow of an old lamp. Dust floated in the air, spinning slowly above the recorder. The tape hissed as it turned, the sound of time itself unraveling. I leaned closer, afraid and desperate to hear more. Every whisper carried a weight. Names, memories, regrets, buried beneath layers of static and shame. The air smelled of rust and old metal, like the remnants of a life that once belonged to someone else. And somehow, to me, I tried to convince myself it was a trick of memory. Maybe someone spliced an old interview. Maybe it was a cruel joke. But deep down, I knew the truth was darker than that. The words on the tape weren't random. They were confessions, the kind that only a man who's seen war could make. And as each one played, I began to remember things I swore I'd forgotten. Faces, screams, the night everything went wrong. There was a tremor in my hands as I reached for the stop button, but I couldn't press it. It felt like if I did, the voice would be trapped forever, along with everything I'd tried to bury. And maybe I deserved to hear it all. What if the tape wasn't a recording from the past, but a message meant for the man I'd become? What if forgiveness doesn't come from others, but from the parts of ourselves we abandoned long ago? The tape clicked softly, and then the voice spoke again. This time, it said something I'll never forget. The voice faded for a moment, swallowed by the static, and I just sat there frozen between disbelief and recognition. It's strange how a single sound can tear open years of silence. That recording wasn't just a voice. It was a wound speaking back to me, reminding me that no one really leaves the past behind. We only learn how to live with the echoes. And maybe that's why I'm telling you this. Because I know I'm not the only one who's ever been haunted by something left unsaid. Have you ever tried to forget a part of yourself, only to hear it whisper back when you least expect it? If this story stirs something inside you, if it makes you remember a voice, a moment, or a regret, tell me about it in the comments. I read every single one, and it's through them that I realize these stories don't belong only to me. They belong to all of us who have loved, lost, and wished we could go back just once more. Your thoughts, your stories, they keep this space alive. They remind me, and maybe remind you too, that we're not alone in what we carry. So if this moment resonated with you, leave your words below. Let them echo with mine. And while you're here, don't forget to like this video. It may sound simple, but it helps more than you think. Every like tells the algorithm that these stories matter, that pain, redemption, and memory still deserve a voice in a world that's always rushing to forget. If you want to keep walking through these memories with me, through the shadows, the regrets, and the truths we uncover together, subscribe to the channel. It's not just a button. It's a way of saying, I'm still here. I want to hear the next story, because what's coming next might make you question where guilt ends and forgiveness truly begins. It took me years to return to that place, the one buried deep beneath the soil and silence. I never planned to go back, but something inside me kept pulling, as if the answers I'd spent a lifetime avoiding were still waiting down there, in the dark. When I found the metal box, it was half covered in dirt, the corners eaten away by time. The hinges resisted when I tried to open it, groaning like something alive. Inside, there was nothing but a single reel of tape, wrapped in a brittle cloth that smelled of rust and smoke. The air was thick, dry, filled with that metallic taste that only old war bunkers carry, a mixture of oil, dust, and forgotten confessions. I remember brushing my fingers against the tape, feeling its rough texture, and thinking how fragile memory truly is, how easily it can be hidden, yet never erased. The silence around me was heavy, like it had been waiting for decades to be broken. Every echo of my breath seemed to disturb the ghosts still living in those walls. I didn't play the tape right away. I couldn't. I just stared at it, trying to understand why it even existed. Why now? After all these years, after all the pretending, why was the past suddenly speaking again? Maybe because no matter how far we run, truth has its own way of finding us. It doesn't chase, it waits. And when we finally stop moving, that's when it whispers. Now I want to go even deeper into this, into what that silence really meant. Because the quiet isn't empty. It's full of things we tried to forget. Choices, regrets, moments that shaped the person we became. Back then, I thought silence was peace. But silence can also be punishment. A constant reminder of the truths we've buried. The truth is never gone. It just hides behind the noise of our own excuses. Standing in that bunker, I could almost hear the past breathing. It wasn't the wind or the crackling of old pipes. It was memory itself, waiting to be acknowledged. Every inch of that place carried the weight of decisions I made when I was younger, when I still believed survival was the same as doing what's right. But war doesn't teach morality. It teaches endurance. And sometimes, endurance means living with the version of yourself you wish had died out there. I realized that opening that box wasn't just about uncovering an object. It was about confronting a truth I'd sealed away with it. The tape was more than a recording. It was a reflection of the man I used to be, and the man I became after losing everything that once made sense. If you've ever found yourself face to face with something from your past, something you thought was gone forever, tell me in the comments what word comes to your mind when you think of that silence. The moment I pressed my hand against that cold, concrete wall, it was as if the years between then and now vanished. The scent of dust and decay dissolved into something sharper. Gunpowder, blood, wet soil. My mind dragged me back to the front lines, to those mornings when the world felt like it was made of smoke and trembling breath. I can still feel the chill cutting through the fabric of my uniform, the weight of the rifle pressed against my palms, the sting of frost biting at the edges of my face. War had a way of silencing everything. The sky, the ground, even your own heartbeat. Yet in that silence, every unspoken thought screamed louder than the explosions around us. There's something about those days that never truly leaves you. You can wash off the dirt, burn the clothes, bury the memories, but the war finds a way to live beneath your skin. It changes your mental lighted, reshapes how you see the world and yourself. I remember thinking survival was victory, that walking away from the battlefield meant I had won. But what I didn't understand back then was that the real battle begins after the noise fades, when the mind becomes the new war zone. The ghosts don't come from outside. They come from the decisions you made when there was no time to think, only to react. I used to believe I was doing the right thing, following orders, protecting my brothers, completing the mission. But as the years passed, the lines between duty and guilt blurred. Every sound, every smell, every flicker of light had the power to drag me. Back there, the echo of boots on gravel still made me flinch. The metallic clink of a lighter could stop my breath. Even laughter, innocent human laughter, would twist inside me, because it reminded me of what we lost. The battlefield might have been miles away, but inside, it was always close. Now I want to go even deeper into this, into the truth hidden behind those memories, the part no one talks about. People often see war as a story of bravery or tragedy, but the real story lives in the quiet moments after the gunfire stops. It's in the man staring at his reflection, trying to recognize what's left of himself. It's in the choices that seemed small at the time but grew heavier with every passing year. That's the truth, Occulta. That sometimes, the hardest thing about surviving isn't what you saw, but what you had to become to make it out alive. Some nights, I still wake up tasting the air of that place. Thick, burnt, heavy with things that can't be named. I used to think it was punishment, but now I see it as memory, refusing to fade, forcing me to remember the cost of every decision. If a single word could describe what war leaves behind in a man's soul, what would it be for you? Write that word below. There was one night that never left me. The night everything changed. I don't talk about it often, not because I've forgotten, but because remembering feels like tearing open a wound that never truly healed. It was supposed to be a simple operation, a quick strike, in and out before dawn. The orders came down unclear, passed from one trembling voice to another, until no one really knew what was true anymore. All we had were coordinates, a vague sense of urgency, and the belief that what we were doing would save lives. But war has a way of twisting truth until it no longer looks like itself. The air that night was thick with tension and smoke, the kind that clings to your lungs and never lets go. I remember the sky, dark, silent, hiding its stars, as if it didn't want to witness what we were about to do. We moved fast, quiet, each step rehearsed yet uncertain. When the signal came, everything blurred into noise. Flashes of light, screams, dust rising like ghosts. And then, silence. The kind of silence that doesn't come from peace, but from the absence of everything that once mattered. We were told the mission was successful, that we had done our duty. But as the smoke cleared, I saw faces. Not soldiers, not enemies, just people, families, children, the kind of sight that shatters a man's certainty in what's right. My hands were shaking, not from the cold this time, but from the realization that something inside me had cracked open. That night, a part of me stayed behind, buried under the ashes of a village that never should have burned. For years, I told myself it was necessary, that in war, mistakes happen, that following orders meant doing my job. But deep down, I knew it wasn't the mission that broke me. It was the moment I stopped questioning. The instant I accepted destruction as routine. That's when the silence began, when I started carrying a weight I couldn't name. You can't wash away that kind of guilt. It seeps into you, reshaping who you are, until even your reflection feels like a stranger's. Now, I want to go even deeper into this, into the truth that most never admit. Because what destroys a man isn't just what he does, but the story he tells himself afterward. It's the mental adate we build to survive, the lies we whisper to make sense of the unbearable. Transformation doesn't always start with healing. Sometimes, it begins with breaking. Sometimes, you have to lose the person you were to understand the person you became. That night taught me that orders end, wars end, but the memory of a single decision can echo forever. If you had to describe that kind of moment, the one that changed everything, what word would you use? Write it below. When I finally gathered the courage to play the tape. Again, it was late, the kind of late where even the night seems to hold its breath. The air around me felt heavy, like the walls themselves were waiting for what would come next. I pressed play, and the reel began to turn with that slow, familiar hiss. Then, through the static, the voice returned. My voice. But it wasn't just words this time. It was pain. It was truth trying to claw its way back into the world. Every crack, every pause between breaths carried something that made my skin tighten. The voice spoke in fragments, as if each sentence had been carved out of regret. It mentioned names, people I had long stopped saying out loud, and places I had tried to erase from my memory. There was a rhythm to it, almost like a confession, but it wasn't meant for anyone else. It was meant for me. The voice trembled when it spoke of that night, of what I did, of what I failed to do. And then came a line that made my heart freeze. You left them there. Those words hit harder than any explosion I had ever survived. I paused the tape, but the silence that followed was worse than the sound. It wasn't empty. It was full of meaning, full of echoes of a man I used to be. I realized then that I wasn't just listening to an old recording. I was listening to a part of myself that I had buried, one that refused to stay quiet any longer. The more I listened, the more I felt the truth pressing against my chest, demanding to be acknowledged. I had recorded this. I must have, but why? Didn't I remember? What kind of man leaves behind a message for himself, a plea for forgiveness only he can understand? Now I want to go even deeper into this, into what this discovery really meant. Because the moment I heard that voice, something inside me shifted. The line between who I was and who I had become started to blur. It wasn't just about guilt anymore. It was about identity, about facing the version of myself that made choices I still couldn't accept. The human mind is strange. Like that, it hides truths it can't bear to face. Yet it always finds ways to bring them back. Through dreams, through whispers, through tapes that shouldn't exist. I sat there, the recorder still spinning, trying to decide whether to stop it or let it finish. But a part of me needed to know how it ended. Maybe it wasn't about forgiveness anymore. Maybe it was about understanding. About finally facing the man who recorded that voice, and realizing he never really left. If you had the chance to hear your own voice confessing something you'd forgotten, would you press play, or turn it off? Write your answer below. The longer I listened, the more the past began to move again, not in memory, but in sensation. It started subtly, like distant footsteps echoing through the mind. But then, the images came. Flashes of faces half lit by fire, the trembling of hands reaching for help, the faint cry of a boy clutching a white flag. That flag still haunts me. Small, stained, fluttering against the chaos was supposed to mean surrender, mercy, a promise that no harm would come. But war doesn't honor promises. It devours them. The tape kept spinning, each turn tightening round my chest. My breath felt shallow, my pulse uneven. The voice, My voice described things in detail I didn't want to hear, moments I had fought to erase for decades. And yet, I couldn't stop it. Each word seemed to pull me deeper into the wreckage of who I used to be. I could see the faces again. The soldier beside me who didn't make it home. The woman at the edge of the ruins whose eyes never left mine. I had tried to silence them all with time, with work, with distance. But guilt has a way of surviving everything. I started to question myself, my sanity, my memory, my very sense of reality. Was this truly a recording? Or had I finally reached the point where the mind begins to blur truth and imagination just to protect itself? The more I listened, the clearer it became that the tape wasn't just the sound, it was a reflection. It was me confronting me, the version I left behind, the one I refused to acknowledge. Every confession on that tape wasn't just a story from the past. It was a wound being reopened in the present. Now, I want to go even deeper into this. Because what I realized then wasn't just about memory or remorse. It was about confrontation. The truth occulta behind healing is that it doesn't begin with forgiveness. It begins with remembering. Every transformation starts with the courage to face what you've spent your life avoiding. The mind hides pain for a reason, but it never forgets. It keeps it locked away, waiting for the moment when you're finally strong enough to see it for what it is. As the reel turned, I began to see the pattern, the way trauma reshapes the human soul. It's not just about what happened, it's about how it lingers, how it changes the way you breathe, the way you dream, the way you look at the world. I realized that maybe this was never about punishment. Maybe it was about truth finally demanding to be heard. When the tape clicked and the room went silent again, I didn't move. I just sat there, listening to the echo of my own heartbeat, wondering whether what I'd heard was real, or if it was the past fighting its way back through me. Tell me in one word, if your memories could speak again, what would they say? And then it hit me. The realization I had been circling around without daring to face. That voice on the tape, it wasn't a stranger. It wasn't a ghost. It was me. Not the man I had become, but the man I once was. The younger version of myself, who still believed in redemption, who thought that confession could somehow wash away the blood and silence the echoes. I remembered it all, the last night before we left the front. The rain beating against the roof of the outpost, the dim light of a lantern flickering as I sat alone with the recorder. I can still see the trembling of my hands as I pressed the red button, my voice low, raw, uncertain. That was the night I tried to make peace with my own sins, not by denying them, but by acknowledging them, by letting them live on that tape, so that maybe I wouldn't have to carry them anymore. The message wasn't meant for anyone else. I never planned for it to be found. It was supposed to be destroyed the next morning, buried in the same fire that consumed the remnants of our camp. But somehow, it survived like a fragment of conscience, refusing to die. Think part of me wanted it too. Maybe, deep down, I knew that one day, I'd need to hear those words again, not to punish myself, but to remember that even in the worst moments, I hadn't completely lost who I was. There was still a spark of humanity in the chaos, a man who felt remorse before the numbness set in. Listening to that tape now, decades later, felt like meeting a stranger and realizing he's family. His voice was softer, steadier, full of belief in things I no longer understood. Forgiveness, hope, redemption. It was like hearing the truth from behind a veil, as if my younger self had left behind a map of my own soul, a warning written in sound. The irony is painful. I spent years trying to forget the man who recorded that message, when all along he was the only part of me worth remembering. Now, I want to go even deeper into this, because that's when I understood something profound about the human mind. We're not just one version of ourselves. We're a collection of them. Every decision, every regret, every moment we choose to silence. The younger me had the courage to speak, to confront the darkness head-on. The older me spent a lifetime running from it. And that's the paradox of transformation. Sometimes, growth doesn't mean moving forward. Sometimes, it means turning back and listening to the voice you tried hardest to forget. The tape wasn't just a confession. It was proof that even at my lowest, there was still a part of me that wanted to be better, that believed truth mattered, even if it hurt. Tell me in one word, if you could speak to your younger self right now, what would you say? At some point, I couldn't just listen anymore. I had to answer. The silence between each confession on the tape began to feel unbearable, like a wound pulsing in the dark, demanding to be touched. My throat tightened as I whispered back to it, first softly, then louder, until I was no longer speaking but pleading. You were supposed to forget, I said, my voice cracking under the weight of the words. You were supposed to die there with them. The sound bounced off the walls, Sharp, desperate, almost unrecognizable. It wasn't anger. Not really. It was grief, dressed in fury. The kind that comes when you realize you've been both the victim and the executioner of your own soul. The tape kept playing, calm and steady, while I unraveled in front of it. My younger self, that voice, frozen in time, spoke of guilt with clarity, of sorrow without shame. And I hated him for that. I hated how certain he sounded, how brave he was for saying aloud what I had spent a lifetime burying. It felt like he had stolen something from me, the right to forget. "You don't get to forgive us," I shouted. "You don't know what it's like to live with this." But the voice on the tape didn't answer. It didn't need to. Every breath it carried was already an answer. "I do know. I was there." Tears blurred my vision as I grabbed the recorder, shaking it as if I could make the past stop spinning. "Why did you do this?" I demanded, but I wasn't sure which version of me I was talking to anymore. The man who recorded the tape, the soldier who survived, or the ghost sitting in this room, trapped between them. I pressed pause, and for a second, the world fell completely still. All I could hear was the sound of my heartbeat, pounding like a reminder that despite everything, despite the shame, the loss, the unbearable memories, I was still alive. Now I want to go even deeper into this, because that moment was more than a breakdown. It was a revelation. Sometimes, the breaking point isn't where you end, it's where you finally begin to see yourself clearly. Pain strips away illusions. It tears down the fragile narratives we build to protect our pride. And beneath all that noise, there's something raw and human. The truth or kelter we spend years running from. I realized that the voice on the tape wasn't haunting me. It was guiding me. It wasn't punishment. It was an invitation to confront what I had become. As I sat there in the aftermath, trembling, surrounded by ghosts that no longer scared me, I understood something. Redemption doesn't come through forgetting. It comes through remembering and surviving the memory. If you had to face the version of yourself that you've been avoiding, what would you say to him first? Write that line below. When I pressed play for the last time, there was no fear left in me, only a strange calm, the kind that comes when you've finally stopped running. The tape began to turn again, the soft hum filling the air like a heartbeat. I sat there quietly, listening not just to the words, but to the spaces between them. Every pause, every crackle of static, carried a different meaning now. The voice no longer sounded like a stranger or a ghost. It sounded human, fragile, tired, but still alive. This time, I didn't interrupt it. I didn't argue, didn't plead. I just listened. I let the sound wash over me, like the tide reclaiming the shore after a storm. The voice spoke of forgiveness, of letting go, of understanding that redemption isn't something we earn from others. It's something we learn to give ourselves. It said things I thought I'd forgotten how to hear, that even broken men can find peace, that even guilt can fade if we stop feeding it with silence. The truth is, I had spent so long trying to be forgiven by the world that I forgot forgiveness begins within. Outside, dawn was breaking. A faint light slipped through the cracks in the window, cutting through the dust. It painted the room in soft gold, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel trapped inside my memories. I felt present, alive. The war was still part of me, yes, but it wasn't the whole of me anymore. The past had finally stopped shouting. It was whispering now, and I could finally listen without drowning in it. I realized that the voice on the tape wasn't there to haunt me. It was there to remind me that no matter how far we fall, there's always a way back, even if that way leads through pain. Now I want to go even deeper into this, because that moment taught me something about the nature of healing. It's not about erasing the past. It's about making peace with the parts of it that still live inside you. True transformation doesn't come from pretending the scars aren't there. It comes from learning how to carry them with grace. It's a shift in mental state, an awakening to the truth occulta. Redemption has never been about perfection. It's about acceptance. As the tape reached its end, the final words were barely audible. Just a whisper fading into static. You did what you could. The reel stopped turning, and for a moment, the silence felt sacred. I exhaled slowly, realizing that, for the first time in decades, I wasn't afraid of what the quiet might bring. If you could play one last message to yourself, a message of truth or peace, what would it say? Write that line below. The silence that followed felt different this time. Not heavy, not suffocating, but pure. It was as if the world had taken one deep breath and finally exhaled. I looked at the tape, still resting in the recorder, and realized it no longer held power over me. It wasn't a curse, nor a confession. It was a mirror, one that had forced me to see the truth behind my own story. For so long, I believed forgiveness was something distant, something you had to earn, after paying the right price. But the real transformation happens the moment you stop running from yourself, the moment you accept that guilt and peace can coexist, that even pain can become a teacher if you're willing to listen. Now, I want to go even deeper into this, because that realization reshaped everything I understood about memory, about consequence, about being human. The truth, occulta, is that time doesn't erase the past. It only changes how you carry it. Every decision, every regret, becomes part of your journey, not as a chain, but as a compass. What matters isn't what you did, but what you choose to learn from it. That's where real redemption begins. Not in forgetting, but in understanding the weight of what remains. I think that's what the voice wanted me to see all along. That the past doesn't speak to those who forget. It whispers to those who still care. Tell me in one word, what does forgiveness mean to you? If you've made it this far, maybe this story spoke to something inside you. That quiet part we all tried to hide. The one that still remembers and still feels. Stories like this aren't easy to tell, but they remind us that we're all walking through our own versions of silence, guilt, and forgiveness. If this journey meant something to you, leave a comment below saying, I listened until the end. It's a simple way to let me know you were here, walking through this with me. And if you felt that connection, that moment where the story and your own thoughts became one, don't forget to like the video. It helps this space grow, so more people can find these voices, these memories, these truths we often keep buried. If you want to keep exploring these reflections, stories about transformation, redemption, and the hidden corners of the human mind, make sure you're subscribed. That's how you'll know when the next story arrives. There's another video right here that continues this kind of journey. It ties into everything we've just shared. Click and come with me. Let's keep listening to the voices the world tries to forget.